welcome. We're very happy that you all made it in here after lunch. As people keep streaming in, we've got another couple of minutes before we kick off the session. This year, we only have 60 minutes for our tech sessions, so we're really struggling to stay within our time limit. So I'm gonna do what I usually do before my sessions, which is to get a feel for the crowd. I want to know who you are, what you do on a daily basis, and then a few other things. So I'll try to warm you up. I know it's hard after lunch. I get to raise your hands, put them back down, and then I'll make you raise them again. So my name is Philip Heedy, and with me up here at the podium I have Hillary Curtis. We're both product managers for ArcGIS Enterprise. So we have a little bit of everything for you once we get into the session. We have a little bit on the system administrator side of things, new functionality and enhancements there. Some user-facing enhancements, new features that we can show and demo a little bit. So how many of you think of yourselves as IT or systems administrators? You install the software, you run the software on a regular basis, on a daily basis. Pretty decent chunk. How many of you are users of ArcGIS Enterprise, either as a GIS analyst, you publish services, author services? How many of you had your hands up both times? Excellent. How many of you are more end users of things like the enterprise portal itself, the web viewer, the map viewer, things like that? How many of you create applications or information products for those end users, kind of the GIS analyst again? Okay, excellent. Well, I still have 1 more minute, so I'll ask some more questions. This is the what's new. So what version are we talking about? 10.6, yes. Just came out here a month and a half, getting close to 2 months ago. We'll also talk a bit about 10.5.1, simply because it's new since last year's Stuff Summit. But for the most part, we'll focus on 10.6. So how many of you are running 10.6? Oh, see, I promised Hillary I was going to ask how many of you are running 10.6.1. That was going to be a trick question, and I totally flubbed it. 10.6, I love you guys. It's awesome. As a product manager, nothing makes me more happy than when customers upgrade on a regular basis. But 10.5.1, good chunk, okay. 10.5, so 10.5, 10.5.1, okay. 10.4, let's just say 10.4x, okay. Starts getting down there a little bit. 10.3x. I feel like there were some people who had both 10.3 and 10.4, that's interesting. 10.2x. See, now it's getting interesting, right? 10.1. Okay, we should talk. January 2018, January 1st, that was a good time. Prior to 10.1, was there a life before 10.1? 10.0s? Ladies in the back. We should also talk. 9x. I'm not even going to try to go there. Any 9x. Both 10.0 and 9x. All right, the showcase is open for a few hours more. We've got lots of people there who would love to talk to you and help you out. We should figure out how to move on from there. So thank you for that. That's always very helpful for us to get a feel. I'm really pleased that so many of you are already on 10.6. Hopefully, if you haven't already found the features we're talking about, we can teach you a little bit. And then all those of you who are on 10.5 beyond, I don't even know how to put this into perspective if you're on 9x. There's a whole generational thing, like millennials, Gen X, I don't know. But let's get started. It's 1:01 p.m. and we'll talk more about Enterprise 10.6 and maybe a smidge of 10.5.1 here for the next hour or so. Take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks everyone for coming, joining us after lunch. As Philip mentioned, my name is Hillary Curtis and I'm on the product management team with Philip and Shannon Kaliski. So I know Philip kind of gave an overview of what we're going to touch on today, but I thought I'd break it down a little bit further. So I'll do an overview of ArcGIS Enterprise. It sounds like most of you are using some form of enterprise. It looked like a lot of hands at 10.5, 10.5.1, 10.6, so that's great to see. But I'll just do an overview of the components and some of the patterns of use that we see for the product. We'll talk about what is new in administration in publishing and analysis. If we have a little bit of time at the end, we'll open it up for some questions, but if not, please do come up and talk to us. As Philip mentioned, also visit us in the showcase. We want to hear from you, we want to hear your experiences, and we want to see what features you're excited about. All right, so let's start with a brief overview. This is kind of our tagline for ArcGIS Enterprise. What is the product? It's a full-featured mapping, analytics, and data management platform. It runs on infrastructure you control, whether that's on premises, in a virtualized environment, or in the cloud. And it enables you to visualize, interpret, and act upon your location-based data. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the contemporary ArcGIS platform. We've heard a lot about Pro and the plenary. There's been a lot of sessions on online this week, but I really wanted to put it into context of where ArcGIS Enterprise stands with that platform, with apps, and with that fundamental developer story. So starting off with Pro, it's powerful desktop software, provides advanced geoprocessing, data management, and geospatial analysis. Moving on to ArcGIS Online, which is a software as a service, the cloud-based mapping and location analytics platform that is lightweight, browser-based, and runs on infrastructure that Esri controls. And then we have ArcGIS Enterprise, which is full-featured, comprehensive GIS platform with advanced capabilities, providing that powerful server-based functionality running on your own infrastructure. And then extending that to applications, whether these are custom applications or applications that Esri's built. So allowing you to extend your reach to other audiences, to folks in the field and in the office through apps like Operations Dashboard and Survey123 and Collector. All of this is integrated together. Enterprise is built to be able to speak to Pro, to speak to these applications. It's kind of a one-stop shop for all things GIS. And then, of course, at the bottom, last but not least, we have ArcGIS for developers, so providing the SDKs and the APIs that you need to extend and customize the platform to your liking. Oops, sorry. Okay, so I wanted to do a little bit of an overview of the components of ArcGIS Enterprise. Some of you may or may not be familiar with them. So looking at the ArcGIS server. So the ArcGIS server can be licensed as 5 different server roles. We have the GIS server, which is used for publishing services and performing analysis in the enterprise portal. Next, we have GeoEvent, which is capturing that real-time streaming data from IoT sources, the Internet of Things, observational data streaming into ArcGIS Enterprise. We have GeoAnalytics, which can analyze massive volumes of historical data, ongoing vector and tabular data through time and space. Image Server, which performs distributed analysis on raster and image services. And then Business Analyst, allowing you to geo-enrich your data with consumer and demographic trends. So lots of functionality from the GIS server, which is that powerhouse, to extending capabilities to other server roles and being able to perform distributed analysis. We have the portal for ArcGIS, which is a software component which enables the enterprise portal. So that's the lightweight web front end, providing that user experience, data management, and self-service mapping capabilities. Then we have the data store, which is one component that can be licensed as 3 different types: the relational, tile cache, and spatiotemporal. So the relational is housing your hosted services. The tile cache is looking at your 3D data. And the spatiotemporal is designed for those that are using GeoEvent and GeoAnalytics to be able to house your data that has both time and space components. And then last, the ArcGIS Web Adapter, which integrates with your web server. I see some folks taking pictures, but I think I'm going to tab to the next slide. We'll have this slide deck available for you afterwards. So the components are fine and great. If you're installing the software, you're likely incredibly familiar with these. But it's more than just the componentry for ArcGIS Enterprise. It's the patterns of use and what the product unlocks and allows you to do moving forward. So whether that's mapping and visualization, if you're a GIS analyst, you're all too familiar with this pattern. Data management for database administrators. Field mobility, allowing those in the field to collect data and feed back into your ArcGIS Enterprise portal. monitoring your assets and your sensors, providing that one-stop analytics shop for big data, IoT, being able to perform that self-service mapping in the ArcGIS Enterprise portal, supporting design and planning and decision support at a high level, and then constituent engagement and sharing and collaboration through distributed collaboration with ArcGIS Online or between other enterprise portals. If you're interested in that, I'm more than happy to talk to you about distributed collaboration at the showcase. So when we look back at the last year and a half, we look back at 3 ArcGIS Enterprise releases. I wanted to put this slide in here just to get a little bit of context on how fast we're developing and releasing the software. So at the end of 2016, we released ArcGIS Enterprise 10.5, which brought some new branding and some new terms and some new kind of terminology and new capabilities. So that was a huge release. And then at 10.5.1, which was released in May of 2017, brought additional capabilities. And now we're looking at 10.6, which was just released in the last month and a half. And for this release, we're really focused on the user experience, making that better for you, looking a lot at the enterprise portal and increasing the user interface and making it more accessible to users, as well as stability and performance enhancements, which Philip is going to demonstrate for us today. So we do, even though it's at the end of the week, we do have a few upcoming sessions. If you are here tomorrow, Philip will be presenting the road ahead, which will be a really, really interesting take on all the new developments we're looking at. I highly recommend that at 8:30 tomorrow morning. Maybe if you're flying out later in the afternoon, definitely jump in there and visit before you leave. Extending ArcGIS Enterprise, which we'll talk about SOEs and SOIs, will be tomorrow afterwards at 10 o'clock. And then WebGIS, a crash course. We'll have 2 product managers, one from ArcGIS Enterprise and one from ArcGIS Online, that will talk through the different patterns of use and how you can take advantage of both platforms. Again, we're at the end of the week here, so we wanted to look back at some past sessions. So all of the slides and recordings will be available. And we do recommend checking a few of these out if you're new to ArcGIS Enterprise, building your first ArcGIS Enterprise deployment. Philip led 2 sessions yesterday for architecting your deployment, which gets a little bit more into capacity planning and scaling, authoring content, ArcGIS Monitor, which is a new product. And then if you're interested in the image server, there was also a raster analysis and image processing session. So definitely check those out kind of in retrospect when the sessions come out. All right. So enough of me talking about enterprise and setting up the stage. We want to get into what's new. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Philip to talk through a few of the new features.
There we go. All right. The first thing that I wanted to talk about was actually not a new feature of the software itself, but some of the changes we've made recently in terms of licensing that I hope everybody has heard about. The first thing was really something that happened at 10.5. So prior to 10.5, we had this concept of a named user, and there was just that. There was a named user. At 10.5, we introduced a new level of named user. So we have now 2, and inventive as we are, we call them levels 1 and levels 2. So level 1 named user was the new thing at 10.5, and that was really there we go, the read-only viewer user. So when you need to give people access to the system, but they're not going to be creating content, they're going to look at the information products, the applications that you or your colleagues make for them. So this was a new way of giving people access to the system at a lower cost than the traditional named user gave. Of course, sitting next to that was the current named user that we already have, which was now being branded as level 2. Level 2 is the full-fledged named user. The user that can create new content, new information products, can consume those information products in different apps. You get access to things like Survey 123, Collector, Operations Dashboard, and so forth. So level 1 was new at 10.5. So why do I bring it up here? Well, we made an announcement not too long ago that level 1 users are now included with every single ArcGIS Enterprise deployment at no additional cost. So whether you've got 4 cores, 8 cores, however many cores you've purchased of ArcGIS Enterprise, you now have the ability to add as many level 1 users to the system as you like without any additional cost. So I think that's pretty huge. Do you agree in the audience? All right. What we hope is that this will really make it much easier for you to make all of the information products, all the maps, all the applications, the story maps, whatever they may be, available to your entire organization. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that you still have to think about scaling your system. Just because you can add thousands of users doesn't mean that your system is necessarily able to handle the load from thousands of users. So do keep that in mind. All right. My clicker doesn't work, so I'm going to sit down. I want to walk. To do this, you simply go into My Esri. You have the ability to generate portal for ArcGIS licenses. This is the option within My Esri. And as it says right here, if you can see it in the screenshot, you can request as many level 1 named users as you need. So you still need to have a license file. What you do is you go into My Esri and say, how many level 1s do you want? Click Generate, and it will give you a license file for whatever that number is. There's no upper bound on it. That's not entirely true. The upper bound is 999,999, because apparently that was how many digits we had for the text field. But you can choose whatever you want. Choose something reasonable so you still have some control over your system, so you don't all of a sudden blow through what your system can handle. Staying in the vein of administrative improvements, so this is more on the IT system administrator side of things. We've made some enhancements beginning at 10.5.1 and now further at 10.6. So the ArcGIS Enterprise Builder was a new option for installing ArcGIS Enterprise, specifically the all-in-one installation on a single machine. If you are okay with having portal for ArcGIS, ArcGIS Server, all the different components running on a single machine, and you're not installing in a cloud environment, then this is by far the easiest way to get up and running with the system. So that was something we introduced new at 10.5.1. What's new at 10.6 with ArcGIS Enterprise Builder are two things. One is there's now also a set of command line tools for essentially automating or scripting the builder itself, so you can make it part of an automated workflow. The initial release at 10.5.1 was a GUI where you clicked next, 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 and you answered about a half dozen questions or so, and it installed everything for you. Now you can do the same thing from the command line. So that's useful if you need to set up test systems, especially on a regular basis, but whatever your workflow is. The other really big new thing for the builder at 10.6 is its ability to automatically upgrade an existing installation if you installed it with the builder at the previous release. If you have a manual setup today, I'm afraid the builder does not help you in this respect. It can't take your manually installed deployment and upgrade it to 10.6. But if you set it up using 10.5.1 builder, then you can now upgrade to 10.6 simply by running the installer, the wizard, and it will do all the plumbing under the hood for you. It's never been easier to upgrade than that. Okay. Next is some performance enhancements, staying in the vein of the system administrator things. The GIS analysts in the crowd who publish their own services, you might appreciate this one as well. We made some under-the-hood changes to give you a much faster experience for when you're doing service management operations. So service management is everything from starting and stopping services, but certainly also things like publishing. Publishing a service obviously involves starting that service afterwards as well. So we have seen performance improvements up to 70% in some of these operations. So personally, I think that's unreasonably exciting. No? So let's see how well I can actually demo that. It should be a simple little thing, but let me see if I can switch. Here we go. All right. So I have two different systems running here. I'm inside of ArcGIS Server Manager. The one here on the left is a 10.5.1 system. So last year, right? I've got sample world cities. We all know and love it. I've got 4 instances running, and I've got sample world cities also running in a separate system over here on the right-hand side, which is my 10.6 system. You might be able to just barely make out, it says Enterprise 10.6, Enterprise 10.5.1 up here in the URL. It's just so I can keep things straight. So let's give 10.5.1 a head start. I'll go over here and click stop as well. For stopping, you might not necessarily see a big difference like that. That was pretty decent for both of them. But let's see how we do on starting operations. So I clicked on the 10.5.1 first, I clicked 10.6 next, and then, well, 10.6 finished, even though it started later, and 10.5.1 came after. No? It's even better when you've got more services. The more services, the more things that are running, the bigger impact you will see. So where this really shines, or where it really makes a difference, is when you're publishing. The publishing process, you can easily shave off something like 10 to 20 seconds, depending on what it is you're publishing, how many instances, and all of those good things that go on under the hood. So I don't know. I used to do a lot of server administration. I think this is pretty cool. This also helps you when you're starting up the system. If you reboot or you restart ArcGIS server, all those services as they're starting up will start that much faster. So there's lots of under the hood benefits that only a true IT administrator will truly appreciate. I was really hoping for a bigger reaction, but that's okay. Thank you. Pity laugh and clap. Tough crowd. All right, on to some other things. Again, this is a little bit on the administrative side, but if you are running in cloud environments such as AWS and Microsoft Azure, and you're doing things like caching map services, how many of you create your own base maps or cached map services? Good deal of you. How many of you run in the cloud? Okay. How would you like to be able to create your caches directly into cloud storage? Say, yes. Gentleman who was both on 10.3 and 10.4, I believe it was. Now, here's your excuse for upgrading to 10.6. So new at 10.6, actually part of this came in 10.5.1, but new at 10.6 is the ability to generate your map service caches directly into cloud storage. When I say cloud storage, it's things like Amazon S3. So you specify an S3 as a cloud store. You register it with your server manager. And now you can generate your cache directly into an S3 bucket. The same thing holds true on the Microsoft Azure side. You can generate it directly into an Azure blob storage bucket. Now, why that makes a difference is it's much, much, much cheaper to have large volumes of data in cloud storage than regular files on an EBS volume or whatever it might be. So if you're in AWS or Azure and you're doing cached map services, this is the feature for you. All right. Now we start getting a little bit more into something that's more user-facing as well. Something new at 10.6 and Pro 2.1 is the ability to publish custom web tools. Who knows what a web tool is? I'll clue you in. It's a geoprocessing service. It's a geoprocessing service that you can consume from directly within the portal's map viewer. So we've had geoprocessing services for many, many, many releases. You've been able to publish them from ArcMap since the dawn of time. And you've been able to publish geoprocessing services from Pro since Pro 1.4, 2.0, I believe. Came in with Enterprise 10.5. Now the new thing is that when you're publishing that web tool, that geoprocessing service, it will automatically become a web tool item within the portal as well. So what in the world does that mean? That means it can now be used from within the analysis toolbar. So for those users who aren't using a desktop software like ArcMap or Pro, or you haven't created a custom application, whether from scratch or using a web app builder widget, they can now simply go into the portal map viewer and make use of it themselves. So I want to actually show that in practice because I think that's a pretty cool new feature. So let's see how this works out as well. It's always fun. I'm gonna do like this. Switch over to my machine in Redlands, where I've got Pro. So first I want to just do a little bit of setup here. I'm in ArcGIS Pro. This is Pro 2.1. I guess technically it's 2.1.2. And I've got a custom tool that I wrote in Python. So I have a Python toolbox up and running. The actual tool itself doesn't matter too much. Suffice it to say, I have to give it 2 inputs, 2 point fields, and it will create spider lines between all those points. That's kind of cute, right? We'll run it just to prove the point. Shouldn't take very long at all. There you go. Spider lines between points. If you want that tool, come talk to us and we can figure out a consulting engagement. Maybe you can teach me a thing or two. Now, the next step after running a geoprocessing tool within Pro in order to share it out as a web tool, or as we used to say, publish a geoprocessing service, is to actually go to the analysis toolbar and my history. So this is very, very similar to what you used to do in ArcMap as well. I can say share as a web tool. So I click on my finished product there. Whoop. And you can see I did test it out this morning. So if my demo fails, I'll claim that it worked at 7:30. What I can do in here is do all of my setup of the tool configuration. So I can give it a name, I can go in and turn things on and off, asynchronous, synchronous, and then most importantly, what I can go in here and say, of all these different parameters, which ones do I want my user to provide? Do I want to hard code some of them? Do I want some of them to be user input and so forth? So what I was going to do here is make the origin points a user-defined value. That's the whole idea behind this. I want them to be able to give it in to the tool. I don't care about this key field. The tool actually has the ability to say only create spider lines between the points where the key fields match up. They have the same value. I don't care about that. I want to create all spider lines. I'm going to do a constant value of empty. So going through this whole little process, I can customize how the web tool actually looks. And then finally, at the end of the day, I will put a tag in, because otherwise I can't publish. I'll analyze, and it will hopefully tell me that nothing is wrong. No, what's actually wrong is that I'm reusing the name of my already published backup service. So once it analyzes, what I'll actually do is do a sleight of hand. And you'll take my word for it, because we don't want to sit around and wait for it to publish. I'll click the button and you can come up and I can prove that I didn't cheat too much. What I will do is I'll switch over to my portal where I've already published out here this morning. So what you can see is I published my tool, so it shows up as an item. You can see that, the spider tool. And what I did is I created a new map, a web map, where I did something similar to what you saw me do within ArcGIS Pro. I have my origin and destination points. So now I can click Analysis. And we've had the analysis tools within the portal for several releases at this point. So we come out of the box with a certain number of vector GP tools and some raster function tools as well. And these come pre-populated. You don't have to publish anything. They're just available with the system once you set up ArcGIS Enterprise. The new thing is this little icon up here, where I can go and search for my own custom analysis tool. So it shows me this tool that I already published. It says it's a geoprocessing service, and there's a spider tool in here. And just like you would expect, just like you're familiar with from the Web App Builder widget and other previous incarnations of the technology, it generates the actual interface for me. And notice it only shows me the parameters that I specified when I published. So now I can set this up. I'll click Run Analysis, and if the demo gods are with us, give it a couple of seconds. And what we should see is exactly what you would expect, which is a bunch of spider lines between all of these different lines. And as a user of this, I didn't have to do anything. As a publisher of this, you didn't have to do anything other than author the model, or in this case, the Python tool, publish it out as a GP service, and now it's available for anybody who has access to the portal in here. Now, my lines out are simply shown in this map, but I could also save them as a layer, persist them as a hosted feature layer, and now reuse them wherever I want to. So the full power of geoprocessing is available within this. I think that one's pretty cool as well. No clapping.
Can you use them also from Web App Builder analysis widget?
And of course, if you have published out these web tools, they can be used anywhere that can consume a geoprocessing service, which means ArcMap Pro, Web App Builder widgets, your own custom applications, whether they're web, native, anything that knows how to talk to a GP service, the GP service is still there under the hood as well. It's not just an item. In fact, just let me prove the point to you. Just because I published from Pro or did this doesn't change that if I click on my item, if I scroll down here, here's the URL for the underlying service that powers this. If I click View, here's my REST API. Within this service, I have a single task. You can see all the different things. You can submit your jobs. That's where your API and SDKs will connect to. All right. Now, I'll hand it back over to Hillary to talk a bit about point clustering.
Okay. So we saw clustering at the plenary. Is everyone there? Okay, cool. So I wanted to demonstrate how clustering is also a feature that's available in the Enterprise Portal Map Viewer. So just as an overview, clustering is a way to extract meaningful information about your data at a larger scale. So if you have a layer that has a lot of point data on it and it looks kind of like noise, it's a little bit messy, clustering is a great way to be able to essentially aggregate that data so that it's a little bit more visible to those that are looking at it on a map. So it groups point features that are close together into one symbol, and it symbolizes based on whatever attribute you've selected. So I'm going to show a demonstration. I'm also going to use that ever favorite world cities layer. So I will go to a web map where I have the feature layer for world cities. So you can see here on my map, I have a large number of points across the globe. Some of them are overlapping. It's a little bit noisy. So I want to configure clustering to be able to symbolize this data in a little bit more accessible way. So what I'm going to do here is go to the drop-down and select clustering. You can see immediately this data is clustered based on the prevalence of cities in that region. It's very easy and dynamic to toggle this as less or more. So you can include more clusters or fewer. You can toggle it on and off if you wanted to take a look at that point data underlying. And then another great feature is that you can actually configure a pop-up. It can be a custom pop-up using arcade expressions. So here, if I click on this, I can see just a generic, this cluster represents 88 features. That doesn't really tell me a lot of information if I'm just taking a look at this map. What features am I looking at? So you can configure your pop-up. And I'm going to say this cluster represents number of cities in this region. And I'm going to select OK. I'm going to save that. I'm going to save my clustering. And now here, I'll click over here in Eastern Europe. This cluster represents 204 cities in this region. So this is highly customizable using Arcade. Whatever attribute or feature you would like to show, you could filter by, you could use that as your kind of what will determine the size of your cluster, and then you can also configure your custom pop-ups. So that is point clustering in the map viewer. And next I wanted to take a look at hosted feature layer views. So this is a feature that has been available in ArcGIS Online for a little bit of time, and now it is introduced at 10.6 in the portal. So essentially, hosted feature layer views allow you to take a lot of source data and then sub-select different attributes and provide a view which will create a new hosted feature layer which will represent that source data. So this is really great if you want to apply different editor settings or determine who has access to the view. Maybe you want to just sub-select a little bit of information and provide it to your different users to control that access. So I wanted to do a little bit of a visual here. So on the left-hand side, we have a layer of point data that shows the green roofs in Chicago. So there's a decent amount of data in here, but say I want to share this information with Philip, but I only want him to be able to see the green roofs that are over a certain amount of vegetated square footage. So what I'll do here is apply a definition query. So I want to say the vegetated square feet is at least 10,000 square feet. I'm going to save that in my view, which will be a new layer representing that source data. And here I have only the points where the green roof is over 10,000 square feet. So say with Philip, I would like the source to be read-only, but I want him to be able to edit that view. Those different capabilities and access privileges are available on the view, and it will always represent that source data. So if I make any changes to the source data, Philip will be able to see that in the view. So I wanted to show you, I'm not going to do a full demonstration, but at least on how you can create a view from a hosted feature layer. All right, so here I have a published service. And I'm going to go to the right-hand side and click Create View off of that service. It will auto-populate a title and tags. You can change these, of course. You can provide a summary and which folder to save it in. And then you'll be able to apply your different definition queries or your symbology and determine which groups that it is saved with. So that is views. So kind of going off the analysis theme that we have here, I'm going to take a look at some of the new tools that are available in GeoAnalytics. So just maybe a show of hands, is anybody looking at GeoAnalytics, currently using it, interested? Okay, a couple. So GeoAnalytics is a server role for your ArcGIS server. And it allows you to process large volumes of vector and tabular data. And it uses the power of distributed computing and analysis to result in analysis that maybe would have taken days, weeks, and months against desktop to hours and minutes. So we already have a number of tools that are available in GeoAnalytics right now that was introduced at 10.5. So we have about a dozen tools, and we've introduced 3 new ones at 10.6. So detect incidents will allow you to set a parameter, so a certain condition. And if your data over time and space has that condition met, you'll be able to see those features highlighted in the output. Calculate fields is a tabular analysis, allowing you to summarize or average your different fields and then provide that in a new table, as well as geocode locations, which is batch geocoding geoprocessing. And in GeoAnalytics, we're able to read from Hive storage or from Azure Blob storage or Amazon Web Services. And now we're able to read Apache ORC and Parquet files. So if you're interested in big data analysis, definitely come visit us. We're happy to talk to you further about the capabilities of GeoAnalytics. Also tomorrow at 1 o'clock, there's an introduction to GeoAnalytics server, which will be led by the product engineers, which I highly recommend. So now I wanted to talk a little bit about collaboration. So stepping out of that analysis and really looking at that sharing, collaboration, constituent engagement pattern of use that we talked about earlier. So what is distributed collaboration? You may have heard the term. You may have seen a demonstration of it at the plenary with the emergency services for the fire reporting. But it's essentially a way to share information and data with other organizations, other enterprise portals, or with ArcGIS Online through an established trusted environment. What this means is that it extends beyond geographic and organizational boundaries. Say you have multiple enterprise portals across the states, you have them in different cities, they're not talking to each other, and you want to be able to share data among those. You can use collaboration starting at 10.5 to be able to do this. And essentially it allows teams to discover that content as they work towards shared goals, initiatives, and projects. So the idea of taking siloed individuals working on a desktop, distributing that into different networks so that data and information products are accessible. So distributed collaboration was introduced at 10.5 between two or multiple enterprise portals. And by that, we were able to share services by reference. So if you had a feature layer and you shared it with another member of your collaboration, they would be able to reference that source layer in your portal and be able to see that item in real time. At 10.5.1, we introduced the capability to collaborate with ArcGIS Online. So if you're thinking about scoping out collaboration and you also have an ArcGIS Online organizational account, definitely look at 10.5.1 or 10.6 to be able to collaborate with Online. Now at 10.6, we've introduced the capability to share feature layers as copies. So instead of referencing that source layer, instead of having to authenticate against that portal that contains that source layer, we actually have the ability to create a new hosted feature layer, a copy of that data in the recipient's portal. So edits to that layer will be synced back with that copy. So if I own the source layer and I'm providing that as a copy to Philip, any edits that I'm making can be synced back between an hour and once a day. And we also introduced a content deletion policy, which maybe is a little bit less exciting, but if you leave a collaboration or a workspace, this governs what happens to your data. So instead of having to go in and say, okay, we're done with this project, now I'm gonna go in and delete item by item, you can say, if I leave a project, I want all of my items to be deleted, or I want other participants to decide whether or not they want to keep my data. So a little animation on that. You can decide if you want all of your content to be deleted or if you want it to remain. One of the other great new features in collaboration we have at 10.6 is synchronization status reporting. So I talked a little bit about how if I share an item as a copy, my edits are going to be synced with other participants. That's fine and well, but that doesn't really provide a lot of information to administrators who are looking over the collaboration and wanting to know when the next synchronization process will happen. So this is a great way to monitor the synchronization status and to determine when the last completed synchronization happened and when your next one is scheduled. So a little bit fine-grained tune administrative side when you're looking at collaboration and whether or not your content has been shared with others. All right, so now let's take a look at the app launcher. So the app launcher is new at 10.6. You may be familiar with it with previous versions of ArcGIS Enterprise where you have a little bookmark tag for your Esri applications, but App Launcher has been extended to your own custom applications or those that are registered with your enterprise portal. So essentially it allows you to bookmark applications that are relevant to your organization. It provides users quicker access into applications so they don't have to search for them in your content. Also, the request for permissions that you may have seen with Esri applications at 10.5 or prior is no longer required for apps that are added here. So I'll show you a little bit of the workflow on the left-hand side. Maybe I'm looking to access insights. I'm prompted for a request for permission. I have to authenticate, and then I'm able to use the application. If I'm looking for my own custom applications, I'm going into the content, I'm searching for them, and I'm trying to find them every time I want to access an application. So now at 10.6, we have the ability to bookmark those applications, to not have to request for permissions, and to be able to kind of register those apps within this one-stop shop bookmark. So I'll show you a little bit about what that looks like from 10.5.1 to 10.6. All right, so here I have a 10.5.1 portal. I just want to show you to validate the fact that if I'm accessing insights for ArcGIS, I get a request for permission and a request to reboot my computer in 4 hours. So here we go, we have a request for permission. Now I'm going to access the same application insights in 10.6. It leads me right into my workbooks. So that's just a really quick shortcut that's a little bit easier in 10.6. And I also want to show you how to register your own application so that it shows up here in this bookmark. I'm going to blow this up a little bit so folks in the back can see. So all I'm going to do here as the administrator is I'm going to tab to Organization. I'm going to go to Edit Settings and to General. I'm going to scroll all the way down to the bottom of this page. I'm going to select Add an App. So here you can see the App Launcher section, a little bit of information, and then a box to be able to add the app. I already have an app registered, so I want to go ahead and add my crowdsource app. I'm going to select this registered app, or I could add it from the app item URL. I'm going to go to Next. I can create a label. I can enter an abbreviation, or I can upload a custom icon if I'd like. So I'm going to say dev. And I'm going to select Done. You can see here that it's added. I can always edit this information or I can delete it. And if I go all the way to the top and I click this bookmark, you can see that my crowdsource app has been added here. So it's a great way to be able to access your apps, make it easier for folks to be able to find them. All right. I'm going to turn it back over to Philip to talk a little bit about publishing privileges.
I get all the really exciting topics. No, there's a certain trend that I get to talk about some of the more administrative things. So new in 10.6 are a couple of privileges related to publishing or sharing of services. So if you're already familiar with the portal and have used it for a while, you'll know that we have the ability to create custom roles. So not everybody gets the same set of privileges, whether it's to create new groups, whether they can share items to the entire portal, share items with the broader world outside of authenticated users. We've got lots of fine-grained privileges that control what you can or cannot do within the system. So one of the requests we've gotten for a while is to have more fine-grained control over the various things you can also publish. You'll probably know, especially if you've been using ArcGIS Server for a while, that there's a distinction between what I would term traditional services, things you've published from ArcMap or now Pro in recent releases, and what we refer to as hosted layers, whether it's hosted feature layers, hosted scene layers, and things of that nature. And what we've heard from many of you is that you wanted the ability to control who can publish those traditional services separately from hosted layers. So that's one of those new privileges that we have within the system. So let me just quickly go out into my portal so you can hopefully see it a little bit better. That was very small. Thankfully, I'm logged in as an administrator. Just like Hillary did just now, I'll go to Organization, Edit Settings, and I'll go down to this Roles tab. So I have a contractor role that is a custom role that I've created. So what you'll see here is that I have a whole number of different privileges. The new one that I'm talking about here is Publish Server-Based Layers. So that gives you the ability to turn on and off the privilege for people to publish new services from ArcMap and Pro, separately from the ability to create new hosted layers from, for example, within the map viewer itself. So that's a big new thing to be able to distinguish between the two different types of services. When we introduce a new privilege like this, we want to make sure that we don't break any of your existing custom roles. So any roles that you had, whether built-in or custom from previous releases, if you upgrade to 10.6, they will retain the same behavior as before, meaning they will have this new privilege turned on, because that was how the system worked in the past. Once you upgrade, if you do want to make use of the new feature, you simply go in, edit your custom roles, turn off the privilege if that's really what you're looking for. Another new privilege that we introduced with 10.6 was this one down here, named Publish Web Tools. So that was the demo I just did. I published a geoprocessing service, or I shared a web tool, as we also say, from within Pro. And it's listed under administrative privileges. Well, why is that? That's because publishing a geoprocessing service, especially the type of service that I did where it was based on Python, is actually a fairly powerful thing. You get to run code on the server, which means that if you run malicious code, there's a lot of potential for interesting things to happen. So we want to make sure that only administrators or people who have been designated to be able to do this can publish those types of services. In the past, you actually had to be a full portal administrator to be able to do this. There was no separate privilege for it. So that's what this thing does for you. You now have the ability to delegate out to those GIS analysts who are trusted to create new models, new Python script tools, and publish those out as services. So that's also new at 10.6. Another new thing at 10.6 is some updates to our groups and content views within the portal itself. If you follow ArcGIS Online, you will probably have been expecting this. We've been making a lot of UX updates over the past couple of releases. At 10.5, we got new item details pages. They got a refreshed look, a better interface for all the different actions you can take. You got a data view and so on and so forth. At 10.6, what we've now gotten is a new view for the content, both my content, but also the organizational content, as well as the groups. So groups and content now look the same as they do in the current release of ArcGIS Online. Now, this, I think, is a really, really nice, cool new feature. How many of you use the print service within the product? I'm betting quite a lot of you. At 10.6, the print service got a significant overhaul, lots of new features. Support for vector tile layers among them. How many of you have been waiting for vector tile layers? Just based on the number of people who are taking pictures, that's good. Very, very happy to say that the print service that comes with 10.6 now supports exporting vector tile layers natively. That means both being able to take the vector tile layer and mash it into a PNG, whatever it is that you're exporting to, but also when doing so to, for example, PDFs. So just to show what that actually means in practice, I'll switch back over to my machine here and show a PDF, and I keep getting locked. So here's actually an example of a PDF that was exported using the new printing service. Now, at first glance, it might not look terribly different. The big thing was this particular layout was authored in Pro, which means I have access to all the new functionality that Pro gives me. It also has a much richer legend. You'll notice that there's a lot of things about the swatches that we were able to generate in previous releases where you had to author these layouts within an ArcMap layout view. Now we can do a lot more interesting things. But specifically when we talk vector tile layers, let's see what happens when I keep zooming in. The background here, this grayish thing with lots of borders, was actually a vector tile layer. And the way that I can tell is that when I keep zooming in on my PDF, it's not rasterized. The vector tile layer actually comes all the way through to my PDF as well. And there's a lot of other great new things in addition to that. My entire web map is layers that I can turn on and off individually. I can turn my layers on, and so on and so forth. There's huge numbers of improvements both to the types of layers as well as the quality of the output that gets generated from the printing service. So that's a huge new feature. The thing to keep in mind here is that there are essentially two types of printing services. There's the one that comes with the system out of the box. Once you upgrade to 10.6, that will automatically take advantage of all these great new features. If you have published your own custom print service, you went into ArcMap, you ran the export to WebMap tool, you published that as a new printing service, you will have to do a little bit of work. Because those custom print services, they take advantage of custom layouts that you can also create. Well, you used to create those layouts in ArcMap, MXDs that you placed in a well-known folder. Now you have to do that through Pro. So if you want to publish your own custom printing services, they will continue to work exactly as they did today after the upgrade, but they won't have all these new features. You'll have to republish them using Pro and reauthor your layouts. Now remember, importing layouts from ArcMap is a cinch with Pro. You simply open up your MXD, import it into Pro, and you can reuse all of your existing work there. But the printing service itself has to get republished as a new geoprocessing service. All right. I'll turn it back over to Hillary to talk about the living atlas of the world.
So there are some new available items for you in Living Atlas of the World by upgrading to 10.6. So as Philip just mentioned, vector tile layers are the hot hit new thing. So new vector tile layers and base maps, as well as demographic data and updated boundary layers for countries, states, counties. So I just wanted to go through a little bit of what we have here in Living Atlas of the World. If you're not using it, we highly recommend it. It's a great library of rich information for you, from base maps to imagery to boundaries and places. You can go to the website and kind of toggle through some of the information that's available. The vector tile layers are super lightweight, easy to load, very quick. So if you're not using vector tile layers, highly recommend testing them today. And then for documentation as well, we have a new documentation experience. So if you're familiar with our web help, it's kind of undergone an overhaul, kind of a new user interface we have for that website. So with that, we really wanted to provide an updated design and a clear entry point to showcase the workflows that you are working with. Better visibility into search and some of the selected sections, and an at-a-glance view of system requirements and some installation guides. So if we head over to our doc page, you can see it has a little bit of a facelift here showcasing the Royal Enterprise Purple, but also being able to toggle easily to what's new, to be able to upgrade, to look at the installation guides, system requirements, as well as providing some links and access into different publications we're releasing for migrating from server to an ArcGIS Enterprise deployment, and some get started cards here for installation and customizing and bringing your own data. So a little bit easier to kind of toggle and navigate. I find the What's New tab really helpful to be able to go in. So if you're interested and want to review some of the features that are new that Philip and I haven't covered today, definitely go in and check that out. So in addition, we didn't get too much into detail into some of the supported apps and new product releases that go alongside ArcGIS Enterprise, but I did want to mention them. At 10.5.1, welcome support for Collector, and at 10.6, Operations Dashboard, which provides that high-level overview of what's going on with your system, what's going on in your GIS. We also have ArcGIS Monitor, which is a new product. Andrew, who leads up that team, has a section in the showcase area to talk through ArcGIS Monitor, which is somewhat of a replacement for System Monitor, being able to access how your system is performing, the capacity and performance of it at any given time. We've also introduced a new extension called the ArcGIS Utility Network Management extension, which is developed for telecommunications and utility companies to be able to network, to be able to trace their models. And there's also a new session for that on Friday, tomorrow at 10 o'clock. If you're interested in that and you're of that industry, definitely head to that session. Couple of resources we would recommend. So I touched on the white paper that's available from a link to our documentation. So we have a new white paper migrating to ArcGIS Enterprise from standalone server, gives some tips and tricks when you're looking at migrating, what your current infrastructure may look like, and some considerations as you're migrating to the full stack. And then also the Architecting Your Deployment, which came out at last year's UC, but definitely recommend that slide documentation to be able to kind of plan and scale and look at different capacities and how you would want that to work. So if you are interested in some of those server roles, there's a lot of good tips and tricks in there for GeoAnalytics and Image Server and GeoEvent. So that concludes what we wanted to cover today. Thank you everyone for visiting us after lunch. I know it's late in the week. We have a few hours that the showcase will be open, so if you want to stop by and chat with us and the rest of the team, definitely do that. And I think Philip and I will hang out up here for about 5 minutes or so if you have any questions or comments. So thank you all so much for coming.